Welcome inside, everyone. Cool new intro we have for ourselves. This is the Red Mile Rundown episode number 4. I'm John Eastop alongside Robert Munich. How are you doing, Robert?
Pretty good. Crazy last like 24 hours here, hey? Oh my God.
Yeah. Played out exactly how everyone was calm and cool on Twitter about just nice flow of the day. Nothing got anyone too excited until the waiver thing happened. Roster breakdown day, final rosters being announced across the National Hockey League. The Flames are no different. They make some moves here. They've got injuries and things to talk about. Robert, let's break down the roster for everyone here. Why don't we start with the roster and who's made this team?
Well, just as we all expected, a young forward was claimed on waivers that the Flames put there. And it was Cole Schwindt, not Jakob Pelletier. I know I was one of the many Flames fans yesterday losing my mind over Jakob Pelletier going on waivers over a guy like Joel Hanley, but he ends up making it through, which is awesome. Because I mean, we'll talk more about Pelletier in the show here, but okay, we'll go into the roster quickly. So you got all your big guns, all your NHL guys that we all knew were going to make the team, and then in terms of the fringe players who were going to make it, you got Kevin Rooney as the fourth line center. Sam Honzik made it. Adam Klapka and Matt Coronado are all in the NHL roster to start the season. And the Flames also put Yegor Sharangovich on IR because he hurt his, they're calling it a lower body injury. So he's out week to week. So Sam Honzik takes his place on a line with Andrei Kuzmenko and Nazem Kadri, which is super intriguing. So that's awesome. And then on defense, it's the six that they've been going with pretty much throughout training camp, along with Tyson Barrie and Joel Hanley. They have 8 defensemen to start the season. I know, John, you're not a fan of that, and quite honestly, neither am I.
Not a fan.
And then in nets, we have Dustin Wolf and Dan Vladar. Devin Cooley sent to the minors. He also cleared waivers today, which is great news because I know both you and I are pretty high on him. And I know I was personally, I was pretty concerned that he was going to get claimed, but instead the Anaheim Ducks, they decided to claim James Reimer instead of Devin Cooley. So,
which
really
is interesting in and of itself.
For sure. I mean, yeah, they end up going with the veteran guy instead of the young up and comer, which was an interesting decision by them. But yeah, so no, we're set to go. We're ready to go for tomorrow night when the Flames take on the Vancouver Canucks. So I'll throw it to you. Why don't we start talking about some of the guys who made the roster, kind of on like the fringe there, some younger guys. Why don't we start with Sammy Honzik, because he's going to be on the line with Kadri and Kuzmenko, which is that's pretty incredible. I mean, if you told me at the very beginning of training camp after the Penticton tournament that Sam Honzik had, that he was going to be starting on a line with essentially your 2 best offensive players, I would have been like, you're insane. You're nuts.
Yeah. I'm absolutely in the same boat here. It's interesting too that he just gets here, have Sharangovich's spot too. It's not, here's your third line role. Let's see how you roll. Let's see if we can put you up the lineup here. It's, here you go, kid. You're with the top 2 guys of our team here. We want you to play power play time as well. And he gets thrown right into the fire. And this is a direct result of his hard work, of his coming to camp with the right mentality and taking advantage of the opportunities that he was given by the Flames, by Ryan Huska, and running with it. He earns this position just by his hard work. Sure, the injury to Sharangovich helps him get elevated in the roster, but he deserves 100% to be on this roster, leading the scoring in the preseason, all these hurdles. And from starting Penticton to now, all he's done is elevate each and every game of what he's done for the Calgary Flames, taken on a little bit more, done a little bit more, been a little harder on pucks, and has really shown why Craig Conroy took him in that loaded draft where a lot of people were bemoaning that pick when it was made, myself included. I'll put myself in that category. But this is what you wanted from Honzik. This is exactly what you want from your young first-rounded drafted players. You want them to come into camp, make your life difficult in decision-wise, and to put themselves in a position to be where Sam Honzik is right now. Now it's up to him to stay here and to stay in a position to be playing every single night. But this guy's absolutely earned this job at this time in that spot, unlike a couple other guys that we might talk about a little bit later on, including Matt Coronado. I thought Matt Coronado, to kind of move along here, did the opposite of Sam Honzik. He was really good at the beginning, had a really good start to camp, but he's kind of faded over the last little while. Now, he makes this roster, in my opinion, because Sharon Govich is on IR, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say about Matt Coronado on this roster and Sam Honzik on this roster as well, because I think these two guys had very opposite camps, and they kind of mirrored one another going in opposite directions here. Matt Coronado, maybe a fringe NHLer at the moment, but he's going to get an opportunity here to show that he should be here longer.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. Matt Coronado's like first 2 or 3 preseason games were incredible. It looked like an entirely different player, especially that first one in Seattle he played. It honestly, it looked night and day compared to what he looked like last year. So yeah, those first 3 games, he was really good, looked like an NHL player, looked like he belonged. But then it was either the last 2 or 3 games he played in. To be honest, I mean, he really had zero impact on the game in those last couple preseason games. So it was a bit of a roller coaster ride for him because he was so good in those first couple and then really not effective whatsoever in the last 2. But you're right. I mean, he earns the roster spot because Yegor Sharangovich is injured. It's going to be interesting to see how they fit Coronado into the lineup. I don't know if it's just going to be Honzik out, Coronado in, or maybe they take Klapka out and put Coronado on the 4th line because Coronado did end up playing on the 4th line at the end of last season. So I don't know exactly how he's going to fit in, but I do hope he does get games before Sharangovich comes back. Because I mean, we all see the shot, we all see the talent, we know what type of player he can be. So I hope he gets a shot in that top 9. Maybe if Honzik kind of struggles a little bit or kind of starts to get some like those rookie jitters, maybe they put Matt Coronado in. We'll see. But good on Coronado. I mean, like I said, he showed strong. He beat out guys like Jakob Pelletier and Dryden Hunt to earn this spot on the team. So good on him. And then the other guy I'm really happy for is Adam Klapka, because I thought he had a fantastic
100%.
preseason, a fantastic training camp. Just like looking at some of the stats I think he played in 5 preseason games. He had 23 hits in those 5 preseason games. The next closest Flame had 9. So he over doubled them in hits in the preseason. He scored 3 goals. He pissed off every team he played against. He got under the skin of opponents. Like he did everything that you want a 4th liner to do. He made a huge impact on the game in small minutes. He was playing pretty much 10 or less minutes a night, yet he was one of the more impactful players on the ice every single time he played. And like I said, it's exactly what you want to see from a 4th liner. So shout out to Adam Klapka. I really hope that he plays on that 4th line consistently with Ryan Lomberg and Kevin Rooney. I think that could be a pretty solid 4th line for the Flames. And just really excited to see him get in the NHL, lay the body, upset some more opponents. Him and Lomberg going at it on the same lines. It's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it.
We beamed quite large about Adam Klapka, no pun intended there, in episode 3 of this show. We beamed really hard about how good he was playing, and that still remains true. And then you watch the second episode of the social media that the Flames have put out on their YouTube channel, and you watch the relationship he seems to have with the guys in the locker room, with Ryan Lomberg on the bench and joking around with the guys. This is a guy that's seemingly fitting in on the ice and off the ice and carving out a nice role for himself. Him with Ryan Lomberg is going to be a lot to handle for a lot of teams who don't have the ability to handle size and the feistiness that those two can bring to the lineup. Happy for Adam Klapka. He fits perfectly for what you want on your 4th line, and happy that he's going to be with Ryan Lomberg, because those two, I think, together, no matter who's at center, they're dragging that person into the fight, and they're going to be right in the thick of all of the muck that the Calgary Flames like to have on their roster, on the bottom of their roster. So happy for Adam Klapka that he is on this roster as well. Let's talk about Jakob Pelletier now, Robert. This was a huge topic of conversation around the Flame fan base. Caught NHL people by surprise that he was put on waivers. I'll let you go first here, and I'll let you get out your piece about Jakob Pelletier, who clears waivers. He will go to the American Hockey League before the Calgary Flames play for the Wranglers here. What did you make of Jakob Pelletier's camp? And then we can discuss here whether this was the right move or not for the Calgary Flames.
Well, so yesterday the Flames put him on waivers, and a lot of the fan base went a little crazy, including myself. And it wasn't because Flames fans thought that he deserved to be on the opening night lineup, because he absolutely did not. To be quite honest, Jakob Pelletier was arguably the worst forward who was in contention for a spot in the opening night lineup on the whole team. So I wrote about this at Flames Nation yesterday, and I broke down kind of both arguments as to whether or not it was a good idea to put Pelletier on waivers. So in the camp where it was a good idea, and he did not deserve to make the team, just here are some numbers just to kind of put in perspective how bad he was. So the Flames, they had 16 forwards play 40-plus minutes in all situations in the preseason. Pelletier, he was the only forward not to record a single point. Literally every other forward, every one of those 15 guys recorded a point. He didn't. He was last in individual expected goals. He was tied for last in shot attempts. He didn't block a shot. And then when it comes to like the analytics, like the underlying numbers, among those same 16 forwards, he had the worst goals for percentage. The Flames were outscored 3-1 while he was on the ice, which is the worst on the team. He had the worst expected goals for percentage, and it was by a considerable margin. And he was 13th in high danger chance percentage. So, like, by the numbers, he was literally the worst player on the Flames in the preseason. So, based off of that, like, you know, Flames fans don't think that he should have been gifted a spot. However, this is the big thing. The whole argument was that the Flames essentially prioritized having a guy like Joel Hanley on the opening night roster instead of a 22-year-old Jakob Pelletier. Because Hanley, he's a number 8 defenseman at best. He's a 33-year-old journeyman. He has 1 year left on his contract. He's not going to be in Calgary long term. Like there's no way he's here beyond next season with all the defensemen they have in their system. So they're keeping a 33-year-old guy who's not going to be on the team long term over a young guy like Jakob Pelletier, who you risked losing on waivers for nothing. That's what Flames fans were pissed off about. I don't think there was a single Flames fan out there who genuinely thought Pelletier deserved to be on the opening night roster, like in Vancouver. But I just think they wanted him to be away from waivers, maybe sit in the press box for a week or two, and then once his opportunity comes, then give him another chance to go at it. So I think that's what Flames fans were all up in arms about. Turns out it doesn't matter at all because he ends up clearing waivers and he goes to the American Hockey League, where, I mean, that's where he should be. Like he needs to get his confidence back. He needs to find his game again. And that's the best place for that is going to be the American Hockey League. So I'm really happy for him that he gets to stay at the Flames organization. And the nice thing is with having the Wranglers and Flames in the same city is like Pelletier's developed this relationship with all these NHL guys, but he still gets to continue to build that. He still gets to continue to be around them outside of the rink because now they're all in the same city still. So it's not like he's completely separate from, you know, the guys like Jonathan Huberdeau and Connor Zary and Matt Coronado, who are he's good friends with. So I'm really happy that he made it through. I'm a big fan of the person. We'll see what he ends up being as a player, but just it was a bit of sigh of relief to see that he did not get claimed.
Yeah, for sure. I'm happy that he's with the Flames organization still. Jakob Pelletier put himself in this situation. He put himself in the position to be put on waivers. He played his way to the American Hockey League. And unfortunately for him, then the Flames had to make that tough decision to put him on waivers. And I'm not saying this is my opinion, just devil's advocate is over my time of watching hockey and listening to coaches talk and general managers talk, they're always going to side with a guy where they know they're going to get out of that guy. And keeping Joe Hanley over Jakob Pelletier, for me, kind of screams that a little bit, where we know what Hanley is going to bring to this lineup. We know that we can rely on Joe Hanley in a lot of situations. We know that Jakob Pelletier still has a lot to go here. So I think this was a little bit of just the Flames going,
We should
we're going to go with the guy that we can rely on a little bit here. And
your audio is like really starting to cut out.
Let's stop for a sec. Yeah, let's stop. It's frustrating as hell.
It's all good.
Okay, I'm going to write down 20-minute mark.
Yeah, we can just cut this part out. Either
and back. Yeah, Jakob Pelletier played himself in this position. He played himself to be placed on waivers. He played his way to the American Hockey League, which is unfortunate for both him and the Flames that they had to make a tough decision. And over the course of my dealing with watching coaches and listening to the coaches and how teams run their teams here in the National Hockey League, coaches love going to the guy that they know what they're getting from and they can trust in situations. And I think that's where Joe Hanley had the upper hand over Jakob Pelletier. They weren't sure what Pelletier was bringing to the lineup every night. They weren't sure what they were going to get out of that guy, but they know for a fact that they can put Joe Hanley into the lineup in a situation and he's going to be fine. And he's going to do what he needs to do in that spot in the lineup. And so I think that's where the Hanley thing comes into play for me for the Calgary Flames and Jakob Pelletier. I don't love the 8 defenseman thing that we'll get into in a little bit here, but I can see why the Flames made the move. Now, not the move I would have made, but that's me in a different situation. But Jakob Pelletier really has only himself to blame for being in this situation. And then it comes down to the Flame fans. Well, Flame fans, roster management and asset management is going to be different than what Conroy or Huska. If they don't believe there's value there from this guy, then they're going to move on from the guy. And then, unfortunately, that's the cutthroat side of the National Hockey League and being a hockey player. You got to be better. You just got to be better if you're Jakob Pelletier.
Yeah, there's no denying that. He really was. He struggled a lot in the preseason. And like when I'm thinking about the Joel Hanley move from last season, like picking him up on waivers, I guess now it almost feels kind of unnecessary by the Flames to do that because he did have that additional year on the contract. It almost seems like the Flames, they kind of overplayed their hand with their defensemen this year because they end up signing Jared Tenorti. They end up signing Tyson Barrie. They claim Hanley on waivers last year, who had an additional year in his contract. All of a sudden, you have these 3 additional veteran D-men that now are taking up roster spots on the NHL, and probably more importantly, are now going to take up roster spots in the AHL because you have those 6 young defensemen down there, and you're probably not going to want to sit veterans like guys like Tenorti and Hanley if he does end up going down. You're not going to want to sit those guys a whole heck of a lot. So it almost seems like the Flames, they kind of overplayed their hand with the defenseman. But just one more thing I just want to point out with Pelletier. He's coming off an injury-riddled season. Last year, those shoulder injuries derailed his entire year. In my opinion, that last year is a complete write-off for Jakob Pelletier, which sucks because it's one of the more important development years of his career. But giving up on that, I think kind of bothered me a little bit yesterday too by like putting him on waivers with the chance of being picked up because there's 3 young players in the Flames system right now that have all struggled with injuries in the past little while and have all ended up becoming NHL players. So you look at Martin Pospisil, he's dealt with concussions and all kinds of injuries for the last 3 or 4 years. The Flames never really gave up on him. Connor Zary in his rookie year, he suffered multiple injuries. He struggled in his rookie year, but was able to bounce back and have a great year in the AHL and turned it into a full-time role in the NHL. And then look no further than Sam Honzik, who was hurt last year. Last year, his season was derailed by injuries too. He was able to come back and put in a really good performance in the preseason, earn a roster spot. So for fans out there, do not give up on Jakob Pelletier just yet. Just because he had a bad year last year, it's not an indication of things to come necessarily because he was hurt the whole year. And it seemed like one of those injuries where not only did it affect him physically, but it also affected him mentally in the sense that he just wasn't necessarily the same player when he came back. Right? Like it looked like he was more hesitant, even though he's a very energetic, aggressive player. It looked like he, wasn't necessarily willing to get into the corners or, battle as hard as he once did before those injuries. And I think that's kind of, it's fair, right? And I think it's fair for him. So just let him come back.
Also on that, sorry to cut you off there, Robert. I just wanted to jump in real quick. Also on that, when you're in and out of a lineup like that, what's your role? What are you being expected of you? And when you're going from 4th line to injury to 3rd line to 4th line to out of the line, you don't know really what your role is coming back from an injury. So you're trying to rehab from an injury and trying to find a role on the team that really was in shambles last year. Let's be honest here. It's kind of hard for a guy like Jakob Pelletier. So it is a lot there, and I'm with you on this one. We got to give Pelletier a little bit of leeway here because of the injuries. At the same time, now, here's your time, Jakob. This is a very important beginning of the season in the American Hockey League for that guy.
100%. And he did sign a 2-year deal. So, like, the way I would approach it if I was the Flames or Flames fans is just give Pelletier, like, pretty much the whole year in the American Hockey League to find his game again and get confident. And then hopefully for next year's training camp, he comes in firing on all cylinders, ready to go. and looking to make a roster spot in this team, because there are going to be some available spots. Guys like Mantha, Kuzmenko, could maybe a guy like Blake Coleman get moved? Like we don't really know yet. So there's going to be chances to make the team next year.
100% there is. 100%. Do we want to talk about these 8D, or do you want to let me just rant on it? Or I don't know if you have.
Let's hear Johnny's rant.
Keeping the 8.
We need to get the first edition of Johnny's rant here.
Well, someone would call it a second after what I went off on Huberto the other episode, but the 8 defense doesn't make a lot of sense for me in a lot of ways. That the third goaltender doesn't make a lot of sense to have on your NHL roster. You're looking at playing time, you're looking at rotations, you're looking at a whole bunch of different things, different factors here. The 8D in both the American Hockey League and on the Flames right now, it looks good come playoff time where you want all these defensemen. But at the beginning of the season where you're trying to give these guys opportunities to prove themselves, opportunities for these kids to grow and have an opportunity and a path forward, an 8th defenseman, veteran defenseman like a Joe Hanley on this roster and a Tyson Barrie on this roster, one feels redundant because you don't need 2 of these number 7 defensemen. And 3, and for a second point is, these kids at the American Hockey League are still trying to push for these jobs. What happens if Solovyov gets off to a hot start in the American Hockey League? There's not even a call-up spot for him to be in on this roster. You're going to have 9 defensemen on that roster. It just seems like there's too much in the way of what you're trying to accomplish here as an organization about between fair playing time, developing these prospects, and having guys around that can be accountable on this roster. It's like having 15 forwards. What's the point of having 15 forwards? It doesn't really work. One extra, I'm old school in the fact where it's one extra forward, one extra defenseman in case of an injury or something on game day that you need to switch a guy out for. Having all these extra bodies around just muddies the water for me. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about blocking a prospect. This is blocking a prospect. Do you really need Tyson Barrie? And you need Hanley, and you need Gilbert in the American Hockey League. You said it earlier. The Flames, I think, overthought themselves on this one a little bit for me. And I don't know. Having Joe Hanley's fine, but then you don't need these other guys as well. Pick a guy, have your defenseman, have your Michael Stone type role guy, and then let everyone else go. And then there's room for your prospects to have a spot if they come up and say they can play alongside someone else. It's a personal preference of mine. I don't like the 8 defensemen, much like a lot of people don't like the third goaltender on the roster. I could be completely up to lunch for some people, but for me, it doesn't feel right because you're blocking a lot of other guys, in my opinion here.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. But I guess for the sake of the podcast, we'll play a little devil's advocate here. I guess if you want to look at it from another perspective, honestly, like having Joel Hanley as the number 8 doesn't really have much of an impact on the NHL team. I mean, I can't really see him getting in the lineup. And then, throughout training camp, I didn't really think any of the younger defensemen showed that they should start in the NHL. I think a lot of the younger guys show that they, eventually will become NHL players. Like I could see a guy like Solovyov being a number 6. I could see Grushnikov playing, Brustevich playing, but I didn't think they were quite ready just yet to start in the NHL. Fair. So I don't know necessarily Hanley's gonna block them just yet. And the thing is, if they do want to call up one of those young D, all they have to do is just put Hanley on waivers and just send him down to the American League. Because you're not really going to be upset if you lose him on waivers. So it would be interesting to hear from Craig Conroy and Ryan Huska why Hanley is on the NHL roster right now. But in the grand scheme of things for this season, I guess I don't really think it will have that much of an impact on things. But if say in the AHL, say a guy like Solovyov or Grushnikov, they do show like they're dominating down there and they need to play in the NHL, and they don't call them up because of a guy like Hanley or Tyson Barrie, then I think that's when Flames fans should really kind of question what the heck is going on right now. But I would just say, maybe for this point of the season, having Hanley there, I mean, it's almost just like a who cares, right?
Yeah, fair enough. I just want you, it's all about message sending as well as your roster construction as well. Trying to toe a line here, it can't be an easy thing for a general manager to do when they're trying to make these rosters up, and the head coach here making these rosters up. If they're undeniable, you got to let these guys play. Hanley's not undeniable for me. And if you put him into the American Hockey League, you risk again blocking another guy that could be in that position. Got to toe the line here a little bit, but I think they overthought it. You have all of these guys on your American Hockey League roster. You have your Gilberts as well, and then you have your Hanleys and such in the National Hockey League. You're kind of making a log jam there for that 7, 8, 9 spot when you have these kids that you really want to see what they can do in situations here. It's all situational for me as well, right?
Yeah.
If these guys can go to the American Hockey League and you have a guy like Solovyov be undeniable down in the American Hockey League, I'm sure he'll push a guy like Gilbert down the depth chart. For example. Just make sure that there's a path here for your kids, and keeping it defenseman, like it just, for me, it's a little bit of a logjam right now for the Calgary Flames. And you just hope that these kids can take their opportunities and progress. We saw that with Brstevich throughout preseason. He took all the opportunities he was given and pushed past them and pushed forward, and was really, really one of the better defenders for the Flames in the preseason. So it's good to have these kids and give them these opportunities. Just don't block them at the end of the day is really what I'm getting at here.
And it's a good point you made about message sending, because what the hell did Joe Hanley do in the preseason? Like, I barely even noticed that he was playing.
Yeah, you couldn't tell me he was better than Brstevich. You couldn't tell me he was better than Grechnikov, Solovyov. Like, I don't even think he was better than Gilbert, to be honest, if I'm going to be completely honest. You don't remember Hanley playing in these preseason games, but you remember these kids.
Totally. But kind of like going back to what I said, say Brstevich or Solovyov beat out Hanley, you don't want those guys as your number 8 in the NHL. You want them to play in the AHL. But yeah,
100%. 100%.
I totally agree. But I think that's enough talk about Joel Hanley and number 8 defenseman in the NHL.
You sure?
I think so. I'm sure the people who are listening are also like, all right, move on, guys. Come on.
Yeah, probably.
One thing let's dive into. So the season starts tomorrow night in Vancouver. So we thought it'd be fun to do some predictions. Let's start with Calgary Flames specific predictions. So, you and I had talked before their episode. We each come up with kind of like 3 or 4 sort of fun, specific Flames predictions here. So why don't we start with you? Give us your first Flames prediction here.
People are going to get sick of me talking about this guy. They really are. For 2 episodes in a row here, I've talked about drinking the Cooley Kool-Aid, and I'm going to continue to drink from it. So kind of a bold prediction for me as we keep this goaltender conversation keeps going up over and over and over. And people on Twitter are like, what do you see in this guy that we're not seeing? Go read Kevin Woodley and how he talks about Cooley and about what he brings to the table. Go listen to what Craig Conroy says about Devin Cooley. For me, at the end of the day, I'm predicting that Devin Cooley will be the majority starter for the Flames throughout this season. I think he'll play the most amount of games of the 3 guys, and that he'll take what people would call the reins of this team. I think that at the end of the day, Vladar will get traded, Wolf will be fine, but I think Devin Cooley will be the majority starter for the Flames. Starting off hot.
That is hot. That is scalding hot. Now, are you saying that he's going to have the most starts throughout the entire season, or after Vladar is traded, halfway through the season?
No, the whole season. At with
that? The whole season.
The whole season.
Wow.
I think Vladar will get a nice run at the beginning here, but I think Devin Cooley will take over and he'll be hot.
Nice. I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah, as we all know on this podcast, I'm skeptical of Dan Vladar, and I'm a big Cooley guy, so I like that. I'll kick things off talking about some of the forwards. So I think Connor Zary is going to be in for a pretty big season. So last year he had 34 points in 63 games. So that's about a 44 point pace over 82 games. And this year, I think he's going to be in like 55, even pushing 60 points this year, especially if he sticks on a line with Michael Backlund and Blake Coleman. I thought that those 3 showed a ton of chemistry in the preseason. If you go and look at some of the underlying numbers, Connor Zary was by far and away the Flames' best player in the preseason. And then there's also that element of the power play. So today at practice, Connor Zary was actually on the first unit, replacing Igor Sharangovich. And who said that 2 episodes ago? John Easthope. John Easthope predicted it, and it came true. So he was on the first power play unit. And I think he's going to get a lot more power play time this season compared to last. And even when Sharangovich comes back, there's a potential, like if Zary really thrives on this top unit here, I could see him maybe even sticking there over a guy like Huberdeau if he doesn't get off to a good start this year. So I'm very high on Connor Zary this year. I think he's in for a big year. Like I said, that kind of 55 to 60 point range for young Mr. Connor Zary.
I love that one so much. I'm a massive Connor Zary guy, as anyone who follows me knows. Love that for him. Love that he's on power play one. Yes, the Sharon Govich injury probably opened that door, but at the same time, Connor Zary's got to be the one to walk through that door, and he gets the first crack at it. So looking forward to seeing that. And I'm going to go on the train here for my next one of the trade train and the Flames kind of retooling on the fly here. I think there's going to be a team in the National Hockey League, say the New York Rangers, who are going to get really desperate around trade deadline and are going to say, doesn't matter the term of the contract, doesn't matter what's left of the contract. We need this guy and we need help. I think the Flames get someone with term traded. So a Nazem Kadri or a Blake Coleman type of player is moved by the Flames by the trade deadline to a desperate team to help them with their playoff push. That's my next big one. I think this Flames rebuild is off to a good start. I think one more piece is about to go out the door, and I think it's going to be a guy with term. So that's what I'm predicting here for the Flames going over to the trade deadline here.
I like that. I like that a lot. And, guys like Kadri and Coleman, they are built for the playoffs.
Coleman, man.
We saw Coleman do it with Tampa Bay. I think Kadri is an absolute gamer. I know earlier in his career, he got into those suspension issues with Toronto, but he kind of turned that around in Colorado. And I think the nice thing about Kadri, and actually this kind of we'll kind of move into my next prediction here, but I think Kadri has shown in his first couple years with Calgary that he might be one of those players that ages really gracefully. Like, I mean, we haven't seen a drop off from in his play at all to start. So I could see a team maybe taking a risk on that. So I like that. So it kind of dovetails into my next prediction. And I know I've talked about these two guys on the show already, and I've been very vocal about them on social media. But I think Nazem Kadri and Andrei Kuzmenko are point per game plus players this season. So each of them either like a point per game at the very minimum, but they have to play together at 5-on-5 in order for this to happen. So I guess there's a little stipulation there. But I just thought at the end of last season, those two guys, they showed incredible chemistry together, whether it was on the power play, whether it was at 5-on-5, just the passes that they were making to each other, finding open passing lanes, like finding that soft space for Kuzmenko to find Kadri in the slot. Like they just made so many plays together. And at the end of the season, in their final 11 games, Andrei Kuzmenko, and this is like when they were put together on a line. Andrei Kuzmenko had 18 points in 11 games. Nazem Kadri had 14 points in his final 11 games last year. So they showed at the end of the 23-24 season that, they can produce points together. Like these guys can be like a pretty elite duo in the NHL. So I have those two guys as point per game plus players this year.
And how good they made that power play at the end of last season as well. I love that prediction. That's a really good one. And those two together, I think will do a lot more damage than some people might give them credit for as well. And that's not just saying points on the board. I think defensively, they're stronger than people will give them credit for. And I think they're going to have a really good season together. I like that one. This next one is probably my hottest take I have of the season. I'm going to drink the Kool-Aid from early in preseason here. I'm going to go off of recency bias maybe a little bit, but I think that we have a rookie who's ready to have a Monahan-esque type preseason and rookie season. He's just going to start nice and slow, and he's just going to build, and he's going to have himself a really fine rookie season. I think Samuel Honzek's here to stay. I think that he'll find himself a nice little home with his opportunity on the top line with Kadri and Kuzmenko, that he won't be undeniable up there, but I think he'll be good enough that they cannot move him down the roster, and they're therefore allowing other moves, say a trade of a Blake Coleman or something down the line here for the Flames to help fit him in and keep him going in the NHL. I think Sam Honzek's in for a good season, given the position he's been put in.
I like it. I like it a lot. And the nice thing with Honzek too is that his game does translate to the bottom six. Yep. So even if Sharon Govich does come back and he gets put on that top line, Honzek can still keep his roster spot because he does have that skill set. But I really like that. And once again, I mean, we talked about Anthony Mantha last week, and if that signing was necessary, seeing a guy like Sam Honzek step up here and show that he can start in the NHL, it almost seems like a guy like Anthony Mantha is kind of redundant. So it's gonna be interesting to see how long he lasts in Calgary. Okay, I got two here, but I'll just do one of them because you already talked about trades. One of my kind of hot takes was that I think there are gonna be 4 players on the roster that they end up trading.
Who 4?
Let's go with that one.
Name some names. Come on, name some names.
Are going to trade at least 4 players off their roster before the trade deadline. I think Andrei Kuzmenko is going to be one. I know there's been some talk recently about the Flames talking about the idea of re-signing him. I don't know if that makes sense long term. I mean, I love the guy's personality. I'm super high on him this year, but signing him to a 6 or 7 year contract with where this team is right now as a 29-year-old, I don't think that makes sense. If they could make it a 2-year deal with a ton of money, then sure, go right ahead. But a 6 or 7 year deal, I don't think that makes sense. So there'd be a guy like Kuzmenko. I think Mantha's gone. And then I think there could be like kind of a mix of guys like Dan Vladar, Tyson Barrie, Rasmus Anderson, Blake Coleman, Nazem Kadri. I think 2 of those types of players could be on their way out this year. So I think the Flames continue to stockpile draft picks, continue to stockpile prospects, and I see them making 4 moves this season.
I love that. I love that a lot, actually. It's really easy actually to come up with 4 names when you list them all off like that. I don't have a 4th one, but why don't you give us your 4th one, Robert? We'll react to that one.
Yep, that sounds good because this will transition nicely into our next topic. So my kind of bold prediction is that the Flames finish 22nd place or better this season, meaning that they will forfeit their first-round pick to the Montreal Canadiens and take the Florida Panthers first-round pick. I just have this feeling for some reason the Calgary Flames are this type of team where when expectations are low, they exceed them. And when expectations are high, they completely fall flat on their face. And this is one of those seasons where literally nobody in the NHL is talking about the Calgary Flames. There are 0 expectations on this team. Everyone has them in the basement. You watch kind of season preview podcasts or you watch analysis on TV. Literally nobody is talking about the Flames. Like I was watching the Spit and Chicklets season preview for the Pacific Division. They talked about every team for 15 to 20 minutes. They talked about the Flames for 5 minutes. It's like that's like kind of what's going on right now. So I think they're totally under the radar. Expectations are low. And I just have this kind of like gut feeling that they're actually going to be better than people expect. So I have them, like I said, 22nd or higher in the standings this year. Like I see, San Jose, Chicago, Columbus, Anaheim as the basement. And then there's like this mushy middle of like 10 to 12 teams. And I think the Flames are kind of right in the middle of that group. So honestly, I hope I'm wrong. Like, I really hope I'm wrong because I think the worst thing that could possibly happen to this team is finishing in 22nd and losing that pick. Yeah. But just like I said, I have this gut feeling they're going to be half decent this year.
I have to laugh because I thought about making that one of my predictions as well, but I'm like, nah, that's dumb. It's dumb and it's easy pickings to say, oh, they're going to finish in the 11th spot and lose that draft pick. But in my notes here, I have it. Where do the Flames finish? And I said bottom 10, but then I put a question mark because I was humming. Is it going to be 10 or 11 or 12? They're totally going to finish right in that same spot like they did last year and play the last few games here where if they win a couple, they're going to get that 12th spot. If they lose a couple, they're going to be in the 8th spot, that type of area for the Flames. I have them like almost exactly what they have last year. So it's funny you bring that up because we just made a whole bunch of enemies on Twitter, which is awesome. There's this. I'm with you. The Flames don't have any expectations. People don't believe in them, but they believe in themselves, and that can be a dangerous thing when teams aren't taking you seriously or they're taking you lightly. You're going to catch them by surprise. Flames 2015 is a great example of that. No expectations. People were taking them lightly, and they just decided to shock people, and they ended up winning a playoff round. I'm not saying this team's going to make the playoffs, but I think we're in for a little bit of peak sadness here for this roster with this team. They're good enough that they can win these hockey games, but they're not good enough that I think they're going to be a playoff team. They're going to be competitive, and that could be a scary thing if you're wondering about those draft picks like you laid out there, Robert.
100%. Okay, so you said you had them kind of close to where they were last year. What record do you think they're gonna put up?
I have them at exactly 500. 35, 35, and 12. Give me exactly 500. I think that they're good enough to pull out some wins, and they're going to lose some games that they probably shouldn't have lost, but I think 500 is a good mark for this team.
That's funny you say that, and we didn't talk about this beforehand, but I have 38, 38, and 6, exactly 500. So we both have them at 82 points this year. That is hilarious.
Yep.
So,
That's
okay,
crazy.
so we have them at 500. It's not going to be good enough to make the playoffs, and it's going to be right on that edge of losing that first round pick. So it's that's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out.
If they finish there, Robert, they better hope for some draft lottery luck. Because if the draft lottery luck goes their way and they can vault themselves into that top 10, then that pick is still safe. It's just don't finish in 12th spot and then have no lottery luck. That'll be peak sadness.
100%. That's a good point made by you. And you know, I think like what we could end up see happening is between the start of the season and the trade deadline, I could really see the Flames being in the mix for a wild card. But then they are going to make some moves. Like they have to make trades, even if they are kind of close to a wild card spot. They have to make moves. And I think from the trade deadline to the end of the season, that's when you really want to see them tank, and that's where you need to see them tank. So it's
much like last season,
and that's exactly what happened last season. I know they had the goaltending and they had that really good defense core for most of the year, but I just, like I said, I just have this kind of sneaking suspicion that they're going to sneak up on teams this year. So why don't we transition that into a look at some NHL-wide predictions? I know we're kind of a Calgary Flames focused podcast, but we thought it'd be fun for today's episode to kind of finish things off with NHL predictions.
Yes.
So we'll start with the Pacific Division. Give us your 1 through 8 in the Pacific.
Okay, I have to preface the Pacific Division. I can never pick Edmonton to win things. That's my preference. That's my thing. It's a personal rule. So I'm going to put Vegas to win the division and Edmonton second, just because of my one rule. But I think Edmonton might win the division here, and then I think Vancouver's going to have a good season. I think that they're in for a poised season, despite whether they have Demko or not. I think they have enough on that team to push them through those injuries. I like Seattle to have a good up season next. Then I kind of hummed and hawed a little bit here, but I'm going to put LA ahead of Calgary, and then have Anaheim and San Jose to round out the bottom here. I don't know what Anaheim's doing. I'd like to put them higher because there's a lot of skill on that roster, but I need to see something from them before I move them up to the Pacific Division here.
Okay, I'll do the honors of taking the Edmonton Oilers to finish first in the Pacific Division. I think they're too good, man. They're too good. I don't see them. Actually, I see them winning the Pacific Division by I wouldn't say a landslide, but it's going to be a pretty wide margin. I thought Vegas got worse in the offseason. I really don't like their goaltending. Losing Marchessault really hurts. Their depth on the wings is not good. I'm not a big Thomas Hertl guy. They seem to get injured all the time. They're becoming an older team. I'm not a huge fan of what they're doing, but the Pacific Division is so bad that I think that they're going to be in second place.
And they know how to win.
They have some obviously some really good veteran players like Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, Alex Pietrangelo, but I still have them in the playoffs, but I don't love their team. And then I have Vancouver in third place. I just thought last year was just one of those years where literally everything went right for the Canucks.
Yeah,
I still think they have a really good team, but I am concerned about Elias Pettersson getting back to his form. He looked brutal pretty much from the All-Star break to the end of the playoffs there. So but I still think they're good enough to get that third place. And then I have LA, Calgary, Seattle, Anaheim, San Jose. I am not a Seattle fan. I think they are super mediocre. I think they're right there kind of with the Flames, but I have the Flames barely finishing ahead of them, kind of like they did last season. So those are my 8 in the Pacific. We'll move on to the Central. I'll start. So I'm going Dallas 1, Nashville 2, Colorado 3, Winnipeg 4, St. Louis 5, Utah 6, Minnesota 7, Chicago 8. And I guess the only kind of surprise in there is maybe Minnesota so low because, over the last 10 years, I think they made the playoffs 8 or 9 times. And they did have like a 115-point season just a couple years ago, but I don't really like the direction that they're heading. I know Brock Faber was a revelation for them, but not a huge fan of their goaltending, not a huge fan of their depth up front, and I have them 7th. So that's kind of my surprise in the Central. What do you got?
You and I see this much differently, which makes it interesting for the podcast. I do still have Dallas taking this division. I like that roster. I like what they're doing. Ottinger with a bounce back season. I think he's going to be much better this year. I like Dallas. Give me Colorado in the second spot. How can you not? Then I have Nashville And then I have mini, because I do not believe in Winnipeg or St. Louis. So I have mini that high based on the fact that the other two teams I can't trust. Then I have Winnipeg, Utah, St. Louis, and the lowly Chicago Blackhawks at the bottom. I think Utah's in for a better season than some are giving them for. They'll take a step, but they're not going to be all that great yet. And I just don't buy what Winnipeg has done here. I don't think they've got any better. I don't think they are better coach-wise either. And Hellebuck always seems to have an up year, down year, up year, down year. And if that pattern continues, this will be a down year for Connor Hellebuck.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I'm not a huge fan of what Winnipeg's doing right now, but I still think they're good enough to get into a playoff spot, maybe like a wild card. But I am with you. I'm not a huge fan of the coaching hire there.
I do think the Central Division does send 5 teams to the playoffs. I think that's how bad the Pacific Division is, that only 3 of those teams are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And just I kind of feel like people are kind of sleeping a little bit on St. Louis. I kind of like their depth. Like, I think Robert Thomas is really like an all-star level player. I think he could push 90 points this year. Like, I really like Kyrou. You know, they got like a younger guy like Jake Neighbors. I love the offer sheets that they did. I thought that was super, super smart by them. And I think Holloway could have a decent year. So I think people are sleeping on St. Louis a little bit, but they're kind of like Calgary in the sense that they're just in the mushy middle. Yeah. But I do think that they could maybe push for a wild card spot. Yeah. Let's move on to the Atlantic. Who do you got in the Atlantic division?
This one also pains me. I have Toronto winning this division. I think they finally get a little bit better here. Better coach. Their defense on the back end is much better than they've had in the past with the addition of Chris Tanev. I do question their goaltending, but I think they're good enough to push past any goaltending issues, much like Edmonton has done for a few years here. Then I have Florida, and then I have Boston, and I have, here's my little surprise here, is I have Detroit ahead of Tampa Bay. I think Detroit's poised to make a step here, while Tampa is poised to fall back a little bit here. Then Ottawa, Montreal, and Buffalo. Those 3 last teams, I need to see something from them before I put them any higher in the rankings here.
I think that's totally fair. Like, in the Atlantic division, I think it's 4 teams at the top, 4 teams at the bottom. And I think you have to kind of keep it that way until one of those teams at the bottom or multiple teams at the bottom prove that they can get past a Tampa Bay, a Florida, Boston, or Toronto. So mine's pretty similar to you. I have Toronto, Tampa, Florida, Boston as my top 4. And then the next 4, I got Ottawa 5, Detroit 6, Montreal 7, Buffalo 8. But I think those teams are all pretty much in kind of that same sort of mediocre category right now. I will say, I do not like what Detroit is doing. I'm not a fan of the job that Steve Yzerman has done there. It just feels like they are so mediocre. It doesn't feel like they're getting out of it anytime soon. Like, I know you're hoping guys like Seider and Raymond become like a number 1 defenseman and a number 1 forward. And, you hope you stay healthy with Larkin and Patrick Kane and all that kind of stuff. But it just does not feel like that team is building towards the Stanley Cup. It feels like they're building towards 8th place every single year. So I'm just not a huge fan there. Yeah, go ahead.
When I was doing my previous podcast and I did my preview last year, I did some number crunching on the Yzer plan, and he, in 2 seasons, that was going into last season, had 24 roster changes in 2 seasons. 24 players out, 24 different players come into his lineup, whether he signed his free agents. That was just free agent signings. That's a lot of movement over 2 seasons. And going into this offseason, he was a little quieter on that because he had his RFAs to sign. But you're doing a lot of movement over just a short amount of time to try to make a team go to the next level. And the only reason I put them above Tampa Bay in my little listing here is because I think that's how far back Tampa might fall down based on what they've done this season. It's not because Detroit's all that much better. I just think that the Tampa Bay's come back to the pack a little bit here.
What don't you like about what Tampa's done?
Well, they've lost guys. They didn't bring anything in. They've lost guys. They lost Stamkos. He's an emotional leader. He's a leader on that bench in that locker room. That does matter over the course of a season. Vasilevsky's been injured the last couple of years. He's been only okay. You have an aging Hedman who's still really, really good, but he's starting to show his wear and tear a little bit. They played a lot of hockey over the last few seasons, and they've just made these reckless moves like the Tanner Jeannot move just to try to stay relevant, and it's got to catch up to you eventually, and I just think it's going to catch up to them this year.
I would agree that's going to catch up to them eventually because, I mean, they've been doing win now moves for a long time. But,
Yep.
I mean, I think Jake Guentzel's a better player than Steven Stamkos is right now. I actually think that's a bit of an upgrade. Maybe not in the locker room because Stamkos is such an emotional leader there, but I actually like Guentzel more. You know, they bring back Ryan McDonough. They trade out an injured Miguel Sergachev, and they bring in JJ Moser. I feel like that's almost a bit of a wash for this season because Sergachev's coming off that injury. The thing that scares me for Tampa is, like, I think the top of their lineup is outstanding. With Kucherov, Point, and Guentzel, and all those guys. It's the depth that kind of scares me. Like their bottom two lines really lack talent. Their bottom defense pairing, I believe, really lacks talent. So, the big boys are going to have to step up and essentially carry that team this year. But I still think those guys, they're so good, they're so talented that I still think they're going to be kind of in that playoff mix.
And like I said, with Vegas knows how to win. So does Tampa Bay. So I'm fully prepared to be wrong on this take of them being that far back, but they know how to win. But can they get it done? That's my only question.
For sure. Okay, we'll go to the Metro. Give us your Metropolitan Division standings.
All right, Metro. I like this division. This one should be a fun, competitive division for me. I like the Rangers to win the division again. I think that's a really strong team. I think they've got the best goalie in the league at the moment. I'm going to put Carolina there until they prove me otherwise. I know they lost a lot of guys, but that's still a team that knows how to win. Everyone's buying the New Jersey Devils Kool-Aid. I'm going to put them third in this division. I also then have Washington, and then there's a nice little mix of teams where I'm not sure where to put them, so I put them in order of how I like them. Philly, Pittsburgh, and the Islanders. I don't like the Islanders. They've just got older again and just repeating what they've done the last, decade. And then, unfortunately, I have the Columbus Blue Jackets in the rear there. Just a tough offseason for the Blue Jackets. Going to be a tough season for them as they're trying to figure out a couple of things here.
Yeah, no, that is definitely fair. My Metro, so I'm with you. I think the Rangers come out on top. I think they're built to win the Stanley Cup right now. Love the goaltending, love the defense. Good high up end talents in the forward group. I think the thing that could put them over the top is Lafreniere becoming like a point per game guy. Maybe a guy like Kako stepping up and becoming a second overall pick type player that he should be. That could really propel them. But I digress. Second, I have New Jersey. Just with the addition of Jacob Markstrom, I think that's just going to be absolutely massive for them. And then hopefully they stay healthy this year. But I think that they could really actually push for a spot in the Stanley Cup final. I'm going to have Carolina third. I didn't really like their offseason. I mean, just take a listen to some of the players they lost. They lost Jake Guentzel, Brady Shea, Brett Pesce, Teuvo Teravainen, Yevgeny Kuznetsov, Stefan Nosen. I mean, that's a lot of talent that they're losing out on. And they didn't really replace it with all that much. I mean, they brought in Sean Walker and Jack Roslovic. Like, it's not great. So I do see Carolina taking a step back, but I just think they're so well coached and they play such like a hard-nosed system that's tough to play against. I think they finished third. And then I got Washington 4, Pittsburgh 5, Islanders 6. I just do not like the Islanders, and I think they're bound to take a step back at some point just because they're so old.
Yep.
Philly 7. I thought everything went right for Philly last year. You know, they were like in a playoff spot for the majority of the season, and just when you take a look at the roster, that's not a playoff team. So I see them taking a step back, and then, like you said, Columbus 8. They'll be in the basement of the standings this year. Unfortunately, it's been a horrific offseason for them, but hopefully everyone's okay down there and everyone can fight their way through it. Because you're right, just absolutely brutal offseason for them.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious. Just want to get your thoughts on the Capitals. What do you make of them heading into this season? Because I mean, they were probably the busiest team in the offseason.
They were busy, but a lot of those moves for me are deck chairs. They're just shuffling deck chairs around. They're bringing in guys to bring in guys. Like, what's the plan for the Capitals long-term here? Is just to get Ovechkin that goals record? Are they actually interested in winning hockey games? I don't know. They brought in guys that are just going to fit around Ovechkin again, and they're going to keep doing the same thing. I think this is a mediocre hockey team. I think they're putting a lot of faith on a young goaltender who had a nice season last year in Lindgren. Can he repeat what he did? What's behind him? Those are question marks as well. Not in love with the coaching staff that they have there either. This is just for me a mediocre team who's really just trying to do one thing, and that's get Ovechkin that goal scoring record. I don't know if this is a playoff team. I really don't. I know they squeaked in last year, but remember they had that massive minus 30 something goal differential, and they were a playoff team, and they can't repeat that. And I think that's exactly what they're headed for, is repeating that type of season again. Just I don't think it's going to be good enough.
That's fair. I mean, based off last season, I don't think they showed enough to prove that they're a playoff team. But one of my hot takes this year is I actually think Washington's going to be pretty good. And I really like the additions they made. I actually think they got significantly better, especially on D with Chychrun and Matt Roy. And then you add Dubois. I mean, who knows what Dubois you're going to get? If you get the engaged Dubois, that is a massive win for that team. But if you get the...
When was the last time we saw engaged Dubois, though?
Winnipeg. It's been a while. But if you can get that like 60-point guy who's just an animal, like just a beast to play against, I mean, that could be huge for them. And I like the Mangiapane trade for them. I think I'm a big Mangiapane fan. And, you know, they add like a guy like Duhaime and Jacob Vrana kind of as depth pieces. I don't know. I just have this feeling that they're going to be a pretty decent team. We'll move on to award winners. So let's do some major awards. We got the Hart, Art Ross, Norris, Richard, Vezina, and Calder Trophy. I know my picks are not that exciting and not that sexy. I don't know about you, but we'll start with you. Who do you got as the Hart Trophy winner?
A lot of these are just so easy and mediocre to pick. The only one that I could really hot take is the Calder, which we'll get to later. But it's hard not to see McDavid win the Hart Trophy, best player in the league. He's motivated, it seems, this year. His team was on the brink last year. It's hard to pick against this guy.
I'm with you. I also have Connor McDavid. I think he is just going to be an unstoppable force this season. I mean, we saw all the Amazon behind the scenes footage of him in the Cup final. This may sound cheesy. Like, I know this is a Flames podcast and we're not supposed to praise Connor McDavid or the Edmonton Oilers, but man, I like what I saw from him in that Amazon series. Just that fire, that intensity. Yep. I gained a lot of respect for him after seeing that. And I think there's this fire in his gut, and I think he's going to be an unstoppable force. And I also have him as my Art Ross Trophy winner as well. I think he's going to run away with it. 150, 160 point year type thing.
We're so boring because we have the same picks on everything. It's hard not to say this guy's going to run away with the Hart Trophy and be that motivated and not also give him the Art Ross. This guy's going to be 2 points per game is going to be his average this year. And he's going to run away with this thing. No question about it for me. No question about it. That he's so motivated that he's just going to carry this in by himself.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. How about the Norris? Who do you got for the Norris?
The Norris, it's hard to go against my boy, so I'm not going to. I think Cale Makar, he's back, he's healthy, he's ready to go, he's motivated, and when he's playing, he is by far the best defenseman in the National Hockey League. All due respect to guys like Quinn Hughes, but Cale Makar is my pick.
By far the best defenseman.
Yes.
Hopefully no Vancouver Canuck fans are listening to this, or else they're going to destroy you online.
Well, I said all due respect.
This is one of my, I guess, more interesting ones. I got Miro Heiskanen winning the Norris this year.
Love it.
For some reason, does it not feel like the Norris Trophy to you is like one of those awards where it's almost like it's this guy's
the highest scoring defenseman?
It can be that, but I think there's an element of like, you know, all these people have won already, but there's one or two guys that shouldn't have won already. Fair. But so now it's their time to get it. Like I know that happened with like Drew Doughty and you know, I'll have to go back and look at some others, but it just kind of feels like one of those awards, and it feels like it's like Heiskanen's time to win it because he's been so good the last 2 or 3 years. I could just see him doing it, and he's on a Dallas Stars team who I think is probably going to win the Western Conference this year.
I like that.
All right, Rocket Richard. Are you going to keep it boring here with the Rocket?
I have to. He's so good, and his shot is so lethal, and no one's been able to even come close to this guy for 2 years. It has to be Austin Matthews.
It has to be. You're right. Literally nobody has come close to him over the last 2 years. He's just that dominant of a goal scorer. If you had to choose one guy around the league to contend with him, do you think there's someone that can get up there with that 60, 70 goal range with him?
I wish he had a better centerman, but I do like David Pastrnak to be up there too.
Yeah, the center thing is a bit of an issue there because I mean Elias Lindholm is not necessarily a playmaker, so it would be hard to see Pastrnak getting up to those levels. I really think if Connor McDavid wanted to, I genuinely think he could score 60, 70 goals. If he just said, like, I'm going to do it myself and I'm not going to pass as much, I think he's talented enough to score 60 or 70. It just kind of comes down to, is that the way he wants to play? And it just doesn't seem like he's ever going to do that. So I could see one day McDavid getting there if he has that mindset, but I think you're bang on. How can you pick against Austin Matthews at this point in time? He's just so good. What about the Vezina? I mean, the Vezina is super interesting because, I mean, there's probably like 10 or 12 guys that could legitimately win the award this year.
This is one of those awards where you actually have to put some thought into it. What's the team around this guy? What's the situation of this team? I have his team winning their division. I have his team in the Stanley Cup final as well. I really think this is a big year. He's motivated by money as well. Contract year. Igor Shesterkin is my pick for the Vezina. I just like the position he's in right now, how he's been playing, and he's really, really motivated here by the next contract and wanted to get the Rangers to the next level.
I like that. I'll go a little off the board, and I'll go with a guy who's been in the news a lot lately, and that's Jeremy Swayman. I like the Bruins sort of style of play, like the Bruin way of doing things. Like, they're a very good defensive team. Their D-core is massive. I think they're going to block a ton of shots. I don't think they're going to give up all that much, and I think Swayman's numbers are going to show it. I just have this feeling Jeremy Swayman is going to win the Vezina this season.
I question Swayman for one thing and one thing only. No training camp, no preseason whatsoever. And in the past, typically these guys don't have great seasons. He could be the exception to all of this, but show me something, Jeremy. I'm happy to be wrong in this day because I'm a big Swayman fan.
Yeah, and I mean, and he hasn't carried the workload yet either, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to not choose him, but I just think he's super talented. I think he plays in a certain style that caters well to goaltenders. And I think, getting 50, 60 starts this year and kind of running with it, I think he's going to end up winning it. And then the other interesting one is the Calder. Once again, there's probably a solid list of like 5 to 7 guys that could win this award. Which direction are you going?
I like this one. This might be my hottest take of all of my awards here because it's been pretty boring so far. Let's be honest here. But I'm going to go to San Jose, but not to the guy that everyone thinks about when they talk about San Jose. This guy's going to Celebrini is going to run away with a lot of things in San Jose, and he's going to get a lot of attention in San Jose. But there's a second guy in San Jose that is going to be very sneakily good that not a lot of people are talking about. I like Will Smith, and I like where he is in that lineup for the San Jose Sharks. I like his game. I like what he brings to the lineup for these guys. I think he could be a sneaky pick for the Calder Trophy, so that's where I'm going to go.
I like that a lot. Right when you said San Jose, I definitely thought you were going to go Celebrini, but going Will Smith is great. I like it. It's a bold take.
And I love Celebrini. I love him.
He's going to be a fantastic player too. But, even like in Will Smith's draft year, I remember like thinking to myself, like, oh God, like I really wish the Flames would somehow find a way to trade up and get this guy. I am also a huge fan of Will Smith. And I'm going to continue the trend of being boring. For the Calder, I'm going to go Matt Mishkov in Philadelphia. You saw what he did in the preseason. I believe he's tied for first in the NHL in preseason scoring. He looked electric. He looked dynamic. And, I think he's 20 years old, 21. So he's not like an 18-year-old rookie. He's got a few years of development. He's played pro hockey at a high level in Russia. And I mean, he's probably going to be the go-to guy in Philly. It'll probably be him and a guy like Travis Konechny. So I like Mishkov to win the Calder. How about a Stanley Cup finalist and a Stanley Cup champion? Did you end up picking one of those?
Oh, I have those. I have those for sure. I have Shesterkin. I have the Shesterkin leading the Rangers over the Dallas Stars for the Stanley Cup.
Over the Dallas Stars, I like it. So New York Rangers win their first cup since 1994. They finally get over that hurdle. They've been so close now for so many years, and they just haven't been able to get there. I like that.
I think they have the right coach at the right time with the right goaltender, and they got the kids that are going to start performing at the right level, and they have the superstars that you want in both forward and defense. This is a good time for the Rangers, and if it's not now, when is it ever going to be for New York? Because if it's not going to be now, they're going to have to start tearing it down soon because that cap is going to catch up with them if they're going to give Shesterkin $12+ million a year.
Yep. The key for them is going to be probably Panarin. It just feels like he's if he can be the Panarin of the regular season in the playoffs, that can make all the difference in the world for that team. So I like that.
That's a Conn Smythe.
My pick for the Stanley Cup final, I'm going to go with the Boston Bruins. They've also been a team that's been kind of knocking on the door for a long time. I think they finally get there. I really like the addition of Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov for this season. I don't like it long term, but I like it for this season.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing for me is, like, if you're going to win a Stanley Cup or you're going to go to the Stanley Cup final, I think you need goaltending. They have it in Swayman.
Mm-hmm.
You need trees on defense. If you take a look at Boston's D-corps, they are massive. I think Charlie McAvoy is the smallest guy, and he's 6'2". The rest of them are behemoths. They're all 6'5" and above. So you got a massive D-corps that can move, that can skate, that can play the puck, play physical. You got great goaltending, and I think you're pretty deep up front. You're not the best team up front when it comes to your forward group, but having Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle and Elias Lindholm down the middle, I think is solid. You have a superstar in Pasternak on the wing. You got experience with a guy like Brad Marchand. I really like the Bruins this year. I think they're going to go to the Stanley Cup final. And then in the Western Conference, going to go with the Dallas Stars. I'm with you on the Stars. I love their lineup. I love the additions of youth in like Wyatt Johnson, Logan Stankoven, Maverick Bourque to go along with their veteran presence with guys like Tyler Seguin, Matt Duchene, Jamie Benn. And then you have, your kind of all-star players like Rupe Hintz and Jason Robertson in there. I mean, that's a really good team. They'll have the Norris Trophy winner on the back end. They have a great goalie in Ottinger. I really, really like what Dallas is doing, and I think this is the year that they also kind of get over the top. And I'll have the Boston Bruins winning the Stanley Cup. I know a lot of fans in Canada won't necessarily like that, but I think they're a team that is built to win a Stanley Cup this season.
I like that you picked them to win because I know how miserable it's going to make the Vancouver Canuck fans feel. So I like it. I like it a lot. And I also like that neither of us picked Edmonton to get anywhere near the Stanley Cup this year again as well. It's so hard to get back.
I was thinking about it
after you've been there. I was thinking about it too, but I'm just not going to sip the Kool-Aid because I've seen so many teams think that they're going to be there the next year and they fall flat the next year. We've seen it time and time again. Nashville and San Jose have done it in recent memory, and it's so hard to get back to the dance. It's so hard to do what Florida Panthers just did, and I see a lot of people out there saying, well, they're just going to be the new Florida Panthers and just going to go win it this year. Well, I don't see it because it takes a lot out of you to get that far. And if I'm going to be completely honest, I still hate that Edmonton D-corps, and I still don't know what they have behind Stuart Skinner in goal, because if they lose anybody on that back end or in goal, that's your season right there for you. There's nothing behind that. You can have all the forwards you want, but come playoff time, you can never outscore your problems. Just go ask the Washington Capitals. Until they figured out their back end, they were 1-and-dones and 2-and-dones in the playoffs until they finally figured out, hey, we could use a defenseman or two to help us in our quest to make the Stanley Cup final. So I just couldn't do Edmonton this year.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, in all fairness, I mean, Vegas, they went to the Cup final, then they ended up winning. Florida went to the Cup final, they ended up winning. So it is like a little bit of a trend. But I mean, last season, the season went so far into June. The Oilers barely had an off season. Like, these guys have barely had time to recover. Their whole team was hurt. So I could see them getting off to a bit of a slow start. And I'm with you on the defense there. I'm not a huge fan of their D-corps. Love their top pairing of Bouchard and Ekholm. I think it's probably one of the best in the NHL. But defense 3 through 6, 3 through 7 is pretty ugly there. I am not a huge fan of what's going on. So,
and just so other fans don't think we're picking on them, if you go the other side to the Florida Panthers, I don't have them making it out of the first round this year. They've played a lot of hockey for 2 seasons. They've depleted their lineup a little bit here. That they're going to be a fine team to watch and play, but come playoff time, I think they're going to fall flat early in the playoffs, just based on the fact of how difficult it is to continually be a successful NHL team over and over and over.
No, I think that's fair. We're up a little over an hour here, but I just want to ask you one kind of final Flames question.
Yep.
Are you excited for this season?
Yeah, let's do it.
What do you think is going to happen this year at the Calgary Flames? Kind of give us your initial thoughts and feelings as to what the Flames are going to be as we head into tomorrow night when they take on Vancouver.
I like this team, and not for the fact that I like them, that they're going to be this amazing team that's going to go win all these hockey games. I like how they've built this roster, the fact that this is going to be, whether they win or they lose, I think we're in for a team that's going to compete every shift. That is the standard that Ryan Huska set from day one of training camp, even before that in Penticton. That's the standard he sets, and he holds these guys accountable. We see in this YouTube program the Flames have been putting out here. Sorry, the name escapes me.
The Chase.
That's what Huska demands. The Chase, thank you. That's what he lays down to these guys, and all these clips we're seeing is just to be competitive, compete. It's painted on the tunnel above when these guys come out of the locker room is compete, and I think that's what we're going to see from the Flames. Whether they win or they lose games will be a different story, but they're going to be a competitive group, a fun group, and with certain guys in the lineup like Lomberg and Klapka that we've talked about, they're going to be a hard out because they're going to be a tough team to play against. There are a lot of question marks still for the Flames to be answered, like what is Huberdeau, what is Mantha, what are these rookies long term? Can Zari repeat last season? But I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this team regardless of the results. I wonder where you're at with this team.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, they're in a rebuild and it looks like they're going to be in the mushy middle. Yet I am like genuinely excited for this season. I think there's going to be a lot of like fun things to watch. Like watching Andre Kuzmenko and Nazem Kadri together all season. I'm really excited about that. I'm excited to see the step forward that young guys take, like Connor Zary, Martin Pospisil, Sam Honzig, Matt Coronado, Adam Klapka. Just kind of watching them grow and develop. I think that's going to be fun. You know, can Yegor Sharangovich, can he get back to being on that 30 goal pace? I know because he's going to miss time, he's probably not going to get to 30, but can he score at that pace again? Like, you know, can Michael Backlund defeat Father Time once again? Can Blake Coleman continue to grow and develop his game, you know, coming off a 30 goal season? Then on the points, you know, I think Mackenzie Weegar and Rasmus Anderson are two really good players, but I'm also excited to see, you know, what the hell is Daniil Miramanov? What can we expect from this guy? We have no idea. Kevin Ball, we really don't have an idea. I think he's going to have a great year, but we don't know. Can Jake Bean step up? You know, does Pahal end up being a mainstay? You know, and then in net is probably the most fascinating thing. Can Dustin Wolf prove that he's an NHL goalie? You know, what's going on with Dan Vladar? Is he a career backup or can he be a starter? Is Cooley going to step up and play? Like, man, like there's so many storylines following this team. And then on top of that, you have all the potential trades that are going to happen this year. So, you know, like I said, for being a rebuilding team, being in the mushy middle, I've actually like very excited, and I'm actually more excited for this season than I have been probably for the last, well, more excited this year than I was for last year. And then kind of going back to when the Flames were rebuilding in 2013 to kind of 2015, this is probably the most excited I've been going into a season in a rebuilding stage for the Flames, because there's just a lot to watch, a lot of storylines, a lot to consume. It's going to be super, super interesting. I'm looking forward to it.
And I'm excited that there are 3 games to watch before we are on the next podcast. So that's very much exciting as well. Finally, gameplay to talk about. Finally get to see all the things we talked about in action. Robert, before we go here, tell the folks what they're looking for on Flames Nation and where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, go on Twitter. I'm at Ring of Fire CGY. I post all the highlights during the games and some articles at flamesnation.ca. So be sure to follow me for lots of Flames content.
And I'm Vintage Johnny 84 on all your social media platforms. Don't forget as well that you can follow the show at can't even talk now, at Red Mile Rundown on all your social media platforms. Like, subscribe so you do not miss an episode of the show. We will see you all back here again next week. Enjoy the